Happy New Year. Let's turn our phone off. Can Bob? Okay, I'm going to call to order. Today is Wednesday, January 2nd, 2019, our Budget and Finance Committee meeting, and I would like to begin by saying Happy New Year. This is our first committee meeting of the year. We're going to begin with resolutions. RS 2019-1531 sponsors Virtue and Betnay, declares surplus and approves the deposition of certain parcels of real property in accordance with Section 2.24050G of the Metro Code of Laws. There is an amendment, so can I get a motion to move the amendment? It's been moved and properly seconded. Do we have discussion on the amendment, or we're going to wait till we get on the bill? Council Lady Allen.
I'm waiting.
Okay. All in favor of the amendment? Oh,
Maybe we can specify which amendment this is.
I was going to have Mr. Attorney, this is the beginning of the
Jameson,
new
that
year. Mr. Jameson clarify what the amendment is.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was trying to get the bill before us as amended, and then we can go from there. Attorney Jameson.
So this would be an amendment that Council Lady Allen has offered that would delete certain properties from consideration in RS 219-1531. I do believe the sponsors were entertaining a deferral on this just to clarify some housekeeping matters that were being discussed by administration. But
There's a motion to defer.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is deferred for one meeting. My ink pen not writing. Hopefully this isn't an indication of how the new year is going to go. Okay, we're on RS 2019-1532, sponsors Virtue, authorizes the Metro Department of Law to compromise and settle the claim of Timothy Warren against the Metro government in the amount of $110,000 and reasonable attorney fees not to exceed $50,000. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilman Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there somebody from the Sheriff's Department who can speak on this resolution?
There is.
All right, thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. I'd like to start with maybe you can explain to us what happened and what the department's position is on this lawsuit and what happened to precipitate it.
Yes, my name is Tony Wilkes. I'm Chief of Corrections for the Sheriff's Office, and just want to say Sheriff Hall intended to be here, but he had some pre-scheduled arrangements. But this incident happened approximately 5 years ago. There was a use of force incident in our intake processing area. One of our corporals violated policy, and we believe that his violation of policy dictated a certain sanctions in terms of discipline. We had some issues within our internal systems where our systems failed. But since that time, we've made some internal changes to ensure those kinds of failures don't occur in the future. And one being from a human resource perspective, there was an issue with the serving of the disciplinary in a timely manner based on civil service rules. We failed to meet those timelines. And from an HR perspective, we now do fully automated systems Not only do we require our facility administrators to have face-to-face conversations with individuals being held accountable, we also have our Human Resource Division who electronically sends out the notifications, as well as our Civil Warrants Division will hand deliver those type of notifications to ensure that those time lapse don't happen again. From a training perspective, there were some questions about the individuals involved maintaining certain training hours. The Tennessee Corrections Institute mandated that all counties within the state of Tennessee submit their training hours into an automated portal to ensure compliance. And since that time, we have achieved our mandatory training at all levels since 2014, as well as all of our ACA standards that meets the same. And I think lastly, from just internally, we do a use of force review. It's all automated. It goes to what we call a criminal review team to determine if in fact things should progress to that level. And since this incident, I think that has been progressing fairly well.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let me get a little bit more specific with you here. You had several officers involved in this incident, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. One allegedly punched the subject in the face, and then it's my understanding that several others subdued the subject. There were attempts to discipline two of those officers. Is it your position that there are two officers who were in violation of your policy, or only one?
No, after a thorough review, we found that the individual who took the actual punch to assault the individual, we believe that they violated the policy. The other individuals that's listed up under this issue, we found them not guilty because we believe that based on our subject control experts in our system, that person followed every policy and procedural guidelines that were set in place. So we found that person not guilty internally.
Okay. So in the lawsuit, there's an allegation that there was injury sustained to the ankles, which would have been a result of the officers other than the one who punched the subject in the face. And that is a party to this settlement. So you believe that your officers acted properly with respect to the disposition of that kind of use of force. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. And subsequent to that, you attempted to discipline the officers, and there's this issue with respect to a 10-day notification. And that 10-day notification was not handled administratively properly by your office. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right. Tell me what you've done to rectify that situation.
Yeah, as I indicated, not only do we still require that the facility administration of that particular institution where the incident occurred has face-to-face, if a person, for whatever reason, especially in this case, has some extended leave, and we're not able to believe that we can have those face-to-face meetings within those 10-day time frames, we also send electronic notifications of the disciplinary sanction, as well as have our Civil Warrants Division hand deliver a copy of the resolution for that sanction.
So what happened in this case?
In this case, it was clear that the facility administration dropped the ball. I can tell you, although it's unfortunate, that administrative bodies are no longer with the sheriff's office. They was held accountable for that because we believe that it was a very intrusive and it was a violation of policy when the officer struck this individual for no good reason, we believe, and the administration for that particular incident is no longer employed.
So the administrative person responsible for seeing to it that this notification was delivered incompetently handled the situation, is what you're saying?
I believe so.
And now that person has been terminated as a result of this and other issues where they handled them similarly?
That is correct.
So you have the personnel issue rectified, but did you also institute other procedures so that, as an example, if I work for the sheriff's department and I commit a violation and you deem that there should be some discipline involved and I need to be notified, what's in place to prevent me from taking 2 weeks leave in going out of the state so that you can't reach me?
Yeah, one of the things, as I indicated earlier, our Human Resource Division is solely responsible for sending out electronic notifications. Our system is automated. It sends out some triggers when those timelines are getting close to expiration. So we not only send those electronically, we send certified letters to their residents, and we believe that that is serving due process. So if the individual chooses to leave state for whatever reason, or purposely try and evade those kinds of disciplinary sanctions, we believe that we have a system that has proven since this case to meet the standard of notice.
So when people go on leave, aren't they now required to maintain a level of communication with you?
Yeah, our policy has
Or
always
make themselves available to be communicated with?
Yes, our policy has always been clear that whenever you're placed on leave, you have to be readily accessible not only to our Human Resource Division, Investigation Division, or Facility Administration. In this particular case, I cannot say specifically that this person was not available. I believe that our internal system failed, our administration failed, and we did the kinds of things to rectify that.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions for you. I've got a quick question for Metro Legal, if you don't mind, Madam Chair. Yes, Mr. Cooper, it appears clear that the Sheriff's Department believes that one party is certainly guilty in this, but the damages that were sustained by the ankles, they don't believe that an improper use of force was involved in that. Can you speak to what Metro Legal's position is on the settlement and what we would be exposed if we did take this thing to beyond settling?
Sure. There is a video of this incident that shows relatively clearly what happened. That video obviously would be shown to the jury, and it is certainly reasonable that the jury could determine that the officer, although the use of force review committee found that he did not violate policy, a jury could still find that force to be excessive as to that second officer. Further complicating the issue is the fact that both officers are under criminal indictment, and if the officer was convicted of an aggravated assault, we would be precluded from arguing that that was reasonable force. So settling now prevents that from being an issue. I mean, there are two claims against Metro. Basically, one is that a deliberate indifference to the use of force, and other is the inadequate training. And we think that as has been indicated, the policy issues at play have been addressed going forward, and they have made the internal control corrections to fix that. But as indicated in 2014 when this happened, there were some issues there.
Are you satisfied? Were there ever any training issues? Did these officers not receive adequate training for this?
The officers did not have I believe that they did not have the correct number of hours they needed for use of force training. Again, that has since been rectified, and he said since 2014 all officers have been compliant with those standards, but these two officers had not received the sufficient number of hours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just state that based on what I've seen in this, I believe that what issues really led to this with respect to policy matters or administrative matters on the part of the Sheriff's Department have since been rectified. And, I understand the complications moving forward with the lawsuit. So for those reasons, I do support this resolution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Polley. We have further discussion. Councilman Mendez, were you seeking recognition? Councilman Mendez.
Thanks. Mr. Cooper, just want to make sure I understood that right. So they've been indicted by a grand jury?
I assume it was through the grand jury, but the trial is scheduled for the end of this month, I believe.
And the materials don't say it, and you didn't say it, but I'm assuming the indictment is in connection with this incident?
Correct.
All right. Were those two individuals defendants in the lawsuit also?
Yes. And we are not settling for them individually.
All right. And and they've got separate counsel?
Correct.
And Metro is not going to pay any damages settlement against them?
No, we are just settling for Metro.
Okay. And if they end up losing a judgment, we're not paying that for
Correct.
them? All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councilman Mendez. Councilman Glover.
Yes, Chair. I would like to ask the representative from the Sheriff's Department a couple of questions after I ask Attorney Cooper a quick question. All right, so let me make sure I understand. This is it. We pay this, we're done as far as the city, correct?
Yes, there would be a full release against Metro.
Okay. So all parties have said, yep, it's over. Chair, may I address the person from the Sheriff's Department?
The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I've got a pretty simple question. Has the sheriff, whenever there's been an issue that's occurred in the jail on any of his staff, has he not automatically taken a very proactive attitude on fixing that right away? And the reason I ask that question, he did that in this instant, did he not?
That is correct. And not only in this particular incident. I've been employed with the Sheriff's Office for 31 years. I've been around Sheriff Hall for his entire career as sheriff, and he is one of those individuals who takes a progressive stance in terms of holding us accountable in the instance where there needs to be some resolution, some modifications to our policy. When these incidents of this nature, we come together as the leadership of that agency, and we determine at that particular time what needs to happen moving forward. And that's not just Sheriff Hall. He brings in our legal counsel. He brings other individuals in that have more of the expertise, per se, in terms of subject control, uses of force. And we have to figure out to correct these problems so it doesn't happen again, especially some of the failures that we had.
And so during your 31 years, I wasn't going to bring up the amount of time, but you know, during that time, have you ever seen a time since Sheriff Hall became our sheriff of Davidson County, he did not follow the same process on a problem, deal with the problem, fix the problem, and do what needed to be done?
That's what he does. That's the consistency about who he is. So I cannot say that I've been around and seen something different.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back to Attorney Cooper, if I may, just very quickly. Given what we just heard, is Metro Legal satisfied that Sheriff Hall has done everything he's supposed to do and could do in order to make sure the city hopefully doesn't enter into this realm again?
Yes, we are satisfied that the changes that they have made to their internal controls will help prevent something like this in the future.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Glover. Councilwoman Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. May I address the gentleman from the Sheriff's Office?
Absolutely.
Okay, sir. Councilman Pulley asked really thorough questions, but I think what kept coming to mind for me as you all talked about policy and training, dropping the ball administratively. You said the person who dropped the ball administratively was terminated, but I think the kind of glaring question is, what about the person who hit somebody in the face for no reason? Does he still work for the Sheriff's Office?
I think that's why we're here. We went through the due process of holding someone accountable. There was a decision made to render a sanction for his actions. Unfortunately, there's a civil service ruling that we should present this information to that individual within a 10-day window, and that didn't happen. And that person is still employed with the Sheriff's Office pending outcome of the criminal status.
So the person who dropped the ball on sending the letter to the person who hit somebody in the face doesn't work for the sheriff's office anymore, but the person who hit somebody in the face still works at the sheriff's office.
That
And
is,
so is it not within Sheriff Hall's authority to terminate that person?
unfortunately, the person that that is the subject behind the use of force is a civil service employee, and the sheriff cannot just terminate that person without due process going through the civil service proceedings.
Okay, so, and due process, understandably, and I appreciate that, but that solely rests on when a letter was mailed? Could this not be brought before the board again, another letter issued? I mean, from a process perspective, this seems to be somewhat of a miscarriage of justice at this juncture. I realize it's going to be litigated, but I mean, do you have anything more to say
Well,
in that regard?
Yeah, I think hindsight is 20/20, and there is protocols that we learned that we could have, should have, and that's why we're here. I think we
Right, I guess I understand could have, should have, sent the letter, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, what do you think how our citizens feel? I mean, I certainly understand that employees of the sheriff's office should be afforded due process. But when you have a video that somebody hit somebody in the face for no cause, and that person still works for the sheriff's office, how do you think the community feels about that?
I cannot say how the community feel, but I can tell you as an agency and as a person who oversees the operations on a daily basis and corrections, that person should not work with the sheriff's office. Unfortunately, I'm bound by certain rules and regulations that I have to follow.
Okay, I appreciate you saying
Our
that.
position was clear in the beginning of what the sanction would be. Unfortunately, things failed through the crevices.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman Henderson. Councilwoman Weiner,
Thank you, Chair. May I direct my question?
floor is yours.
Thank you. I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
This individual who did the punch and harmed the prisoner or whoever it was in the room, what level of engagement with the community has that person had over the last 4.5, almost 5 years? What's his job been? Did that get changed, I hope?
Absolutely. There is a law that basically says if there's any concerns or violation of policy, and then internally what we've instituted, if there's any physical force that we believe is a violation of policy, and in this particular case, that person no longer has physical contact with the inmate population. It's in a clerical type position from this point on.
Okay, and then back to civil service. Is there an appeals process that the sheriff's office can go through with the Civil Service Commission in order to facilitate the removal of this person?
That I'm not clear if there's an appeal to go back and redo a particular discipline.
Hold that thought. Mr. Cooper, is there a process for that?
I would have to check on that. I'm not an expert in civil service rules. I can check on that and get back with you tomorrow.
Well, the sense that I'm getting in the room is that that's something that we all feel like needs to be addressed and that we need clarity on that subject.
I'm not aware of any rule that would preclude issuing discipline again, but I'll check on that and get back with you tomorrow.
Can you also find out the extent of the discipline that they're allowed to address?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Weiner. Councilman Pulley, are you seeking to be recognized again? Councilman Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly to maybe help piggyback on Council Lady Henderson's question. There are criminal charges pending against the same individual, and once those charges are disposed of, if he is convicted, then that brings the option back to further discipline. So he is subject to disciplinary matters on that criminal charge as well, which can include termination. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, thanks very much. Mr. Cooper, we don't have any statute of limitations issues on the criminal charge at all, do we?
Attorney Cooper?
That would be up to the DA.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so now. that you've been
I mean,
charged.
they've,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Pulley. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2019-1533, sponsors Vircher and Freeman, accepts a donation from Music City Incorporated to the Metro government for the use and benefit of the Nashville Fire Department. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2019-1534, sponsors O'Connell, Vircher, and Syracuse, approves an application for local parks and recreation fund grant from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation to the Metro Board of Parks and Recreation to develop Capitol View Park. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Cooper, you were? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2019-1535, sponsors Vircher, O'Connell, and others, approves an application for a flood mitigation assistance grant from the State Tennessee Emergency Management Agency to the Metro Water Services Department. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. We still got our quorum. Okay. Councilman Pulley, please. We need our quorum. RS 2019-1536, sponsors Vircher, O'Connell, and Hastings, approves an application for a hazard mitigation grant from the State Tennessee Emergency Management Agency to the Metro Water Services Department. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. That brings us to bills on second reading. BL 2018-1439, sponsor Sledge, amends Section 2.149.040 of the Metro Code of Laws to authorize the Metro Housing Trust Fund Commission to rescind grant contracts and collect funds previously allocated to organizations that failed to execute contractual obligations in a timely manner. There is a letter from the sponsor for our 2 meeting deferrals. Their motion. It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Bill is deferred for 2 meetings. Now we're on Bill 2018-1442, sponsors Vircher and O'Connell, approves the acquisition of interest in a parcel of real property from 4 parties and approving a participation agreement, a license agreement, and an easement agreement, all between the Metro government and Uptown Property Holdings, LLC, and in connection with the development of the Nashville Yards project in downtown Nashville. There is an amendment. Councilman Mendez, would you like to move your amendment and advise the committee of the amendment before we actually get on the bill?
Sure, I'll move the amendment.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor?
You want me to say
Yeah,
what-
you can go ahead and say.
Okay, sorry.
I'm taking for granted that I know what it is. I'm sorry, committee members.
So the amendment would add a clawback provision that in 3 situations would claw back any money that had been provided by Metro under the participation agreement. The first situation would be if the work is the defined term, which is the $15 million worth of infrastructure work that Metro is specifically paying for. If that work doesn't get completed properly, then any money that had been paid under the participation agreement would get paid back to Metro. The second situation would involve the bigger infrastructure project, which the preliminary plans estimate to be about $79 million worth of work. If all of that is not substantially complete, then the incentive would have to be paid back. And the third situation is if Nashville Yards doesn't provide written documentation reasonably acceptable to Metro confirming that the park on the premises will remain permanently open and green space, then Metro would have a remedy to force that to happen also. I can report that legal representatives of Nashville Yards have taken a look at this and told me that they're okay with the changes, and I appreciate their working with me through the holidays on this.
Okay, so the amendment has been moved and properly seconded. So council members in the queue, it's discussion on the amendment. You want to actually get on the action? You're on the amendment, Council Lady Allen? Council Lady Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for Mr. Mendez about the, there's a reference to Land Trust of Tennessee. So can we just confirm that they're involved in this conservation and that, I mean, this conversation, and that's how that public space easement will be
Councilman Mendez.
permanent?
Sure, and Metro Legal, Mr. Jameson can correct me if I'm wrong about this. Yes, they're already involved, and as I understand it, the intention absolutely at all times has been that there would be a conservation easement for them to be involved. What this sets up is a remedy for Metro if that doesn't happen with written documentation to Metro's satisfaction.
That answers your question, Councilwoman. Any other discussion on the amendment before we vote? Councilman Hall.
And this is for the amendment, Councilman Mendez. Is there a timetable involved? You said the work being completed adequately. Is there also a time frame in which those particular items need to be completed?
Councilman Mendez.
Thank you. So I had initially prepared it to say timely, which is, you'd ask the same question, what timely meant. And ultimately, what we decided in our conversations was that if it's happening too slowly for Metro, then they can invoke the written notice provision you'd see at the bottom of the first page of the amendment has a section where Metro can provide written notice that the work hasn't been completed properly, and then there's a 90-day period for Nashville Yards to cure. So the way it ended up is the keys to the decision-making about whether it's timely or not are really with Metro, and as long as we, if Metro felt that it was not being done reasonably quick enough, it could give this 90-day notice. But there, to your specific question, there is not a specific time frame.
Any further questions, Councilman Hall? Okay. Councilman Glover, you had discussion on the amendment? Yes. Councilman Glover.
So, because so many of us in the city are trying to figure out what all this actually is, how it works, et cetera, and so many of us are just not quite smart enough to understand all the moving parts of this deal that is happening. Mr. Jameson, explain to me, if you would please, sir, how this with the amendment and how this works, and does this negate the $15 million on what might be offered in other incentives down the road to a particular occupant there?
No. So the heart of this is the participation agreement, and the gist of that is the acquisition of 4 pieces of property from 4 entities, and then the create and completion of infrastructure work essentially by Uptown Properties, and our agreement to essentially reimburse up to $15.2 million for certain portions of that infrastructure. What Councilman Mendez noted was that there's no absolute guarantee that upon their failure to actually complete a project, in other words, the way the participation agreement was worded was, we'll pay you upon your invoice and pay you upon your invoice, but what if the project's not actually completed? So the amendment adds the clawback provision that's essentially bolsters, tightens, strengthens Metro getting what it's paying for its 15.2. That, in a nutshell, is what the amendment does, and that's how it relates to the original.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm real clear on the way I'm asking the question. This amendment and the way that it's, quote, cleaned up the bill as we are interpreting it, doesn't have anything to do with the other 15 million that would be given for a potential occupant there in that building?
No, no. I'm
So are
sorry.
we talking about $30.2 million actually?
Well, all the amendment addresses is the 15.2 that we're paying for in infrastructure.
Okay, well, so let me rephrase the question. 15.2 million here, 15 million to the potential occupant. Now, I'm real not smart sometimes, but 15 and 15.2 is $30.2 million. Now, who's picking up the tab let's go back to the 15.2 million. Who's picking up the tab on the 15.2 million?
It's the metro government that's spending, and then there's a breakdown of how that's being provided, but bottom line is the metro government.
Okay, and then if we give a $15 million incentive, who's picking up that tab?
Well, to the extent it's not a cash outlay, but it would be the metropolitan government.
Well, it's not coming into the coffers in Nashville. Am I wrong on that?
You're correct.
Okay, so $30.2 million is a pretty fair assessment. Given this, I keep trying to figure out how do we keep doing these deals? And I'm really not trying to fight the deal, but the timing stinks on this. We come out of the holidays, here it is, boom, and because the entire puzzle's not laid out before us, and we're going to spend all this money if we approve it and move forward. Am I missing something? I mean, am I not connecting the dots for my little simple mind? Mr. Jameson?
I think you're entering the realm of policy decisions, and that's, I think that's for the council to determine and not for anybody
And
up here.
Councilman Glover, you're basically asking Attorney Jameson to.
Well, I'm asking,
Yeah, so if
we do this, are we done with the deal? Or is there another 15 million coming to us? Perhaps I wasn't quite clear enough on that, Chair. So I'll re-ask the question, Mr. Jameson. If we approve this, is there another $15 million coming to us for incentives for the Amazon deal?
If there is, I'm unaware of it.
So the $500 per employee, you don't think it's coming?
I'm sorry. With respect to that, I assume that may be coming, but I have not seen any documentation or anything has been provided to the council office indicating that it's coming.
Okay, well, so here's the bottom line. Neither have I. So I don't know what we're going to do with this. I'm not going to vote for this right now because I don't think we've got enough information. Do we create a problem if we wait to understand the entire deal with one full package to where we understand exactly what we're putting the taxpayers, the liability we're putting on their backs? I mean, if we don't do this deal, because we hear it all the time, gosh, if we don't do this right now, we're going to blow it. Are we going to blow the deal if we ask for it to all be presented in one package to where we can understand collectively what all this stuff means?
I'm not aware of any particular timelines that make this a matter of urgency today or tomorrow. But
so is the administration prepared to answer that question?
Mr. Wiltshire?
Councilman, I appreciate your question. A couple of just clarification points here. So as we have discussed, and as Amazon has stated publicly, they'll be coming forward with an incentive request at some point in the future. As you know very well, those are operating dollars and something different. But the issue before the council today is separate and totally unrelated to Amazon in the sense that it was a negotiation that happened previous to Amazon making its decision about coming to Nashville in general or coming to this parcel in particular. And so this discussion about the city investing in infrastructure, water and public works infrastructure to develop the infrastructure for the city is separate. I would say, it humbly is separate. Now, to your point, it's clearly happening in the same general space, but in my mind, that's like saying decisions about Metro Police and the Central Precinct also cover this area, and so we shouldn't make any decisions about funding the police. That these are certainly overlapping things, but are fundamentally separate from each other. And I guess the important point is that this discussion about infrastructure for this important investment happened in advance of Amazon making any decision about where it wanted to go.
So then Amazon never asked about any of the infrastructure or anything of that nature?
I mean, I'm not aware of all the questions that Amazon asked, so I don't want to say that they never asked about that. They certainly asked many questions about the infrastructure capacity at the various sites that they went to, and so there were some discussions, but this is not related to Amazon in any way. In other words, let me be even more specific. If Amazon had not chosen to come to Nashville, and if Amazon had not chosen to come to this site in particular, but had gone elsewhere in Nashville, we would still be here having this conversation today about this particular piece of legislation.
Okay, and I think there are several of us who sit in this chamber who have this conversation about trying to take care of our districts that we're still not there on. So I'm glad you brought up the operational money. That's a good thing. The debt service that we pay for all these bonds that we take on, does that money come out of operational?
I'm not the budget person here, but yes. I mean, yes, absolutely.
The answer is yes.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And so when we are trying to figure out how do we move the city forward and how do we manage our money properly, we have an obligation every year that we have to pay. And every bit of that comes out of operational except for when we take money out of our savings account, which we've done that pretty frequently over the last few years. And so that being said, I appreciate what you're saying. But again, I'm going to go back to, I know in my district, I've been asking and asking and asking for infrastructure in order to hopefully bring in business. So I appreciate the fact you're saying that we would have been having this conversation anyway, but at the end of the day, we're going to ask, and correct me, and let me be very, very clear on the way I ask this question. We're going to ask the taxpayers of Nashville to pick up the debt service on $15.2 million potentially, and then also pay a $500 per employee in the event all of this deal comes together. And don't get me wrong, I'm a pro-business person. You know that. But I'm trying to figure out, when do we stop putting all of this on the taxpayers' backs, because they're getting a little fed up with it. So I'm simply asking $15.2 million and $15 million. If that deal occurs, is that the numbers we're looking at as a whole for the city?
I want to make sure we're staying on the amendment, but I'm happy
Well, I
to
think
answer
we
the
are.
question.
Correct me if I'm wrong. And Councilman Mendez, if I'm wrong, please help me.
Councilman Glover, Mr. Wiltshire, you can hold off. I'm going to go back to Councilman Mendez.
Okay.
Councilman Mendez, can you provide some clarity? This is discussion on the amendment. We are not
thought I
yet
was.
on the actual bill.
So the amendment is just to add a clawback provision so that if this gets passed, there's a clawback provision on the bill. So I think, I do think that most of the comments relate to the bill, but I can understand where it's all tied together, so maybe it relates to the amendment. I would say several things quickly. First of all, on the $15 million worth of job credits that are coming theoretically down the pike for Amazon, I've absolutely not made a decision on that, and my vote on that's a long way from a yes right now. I do view this as different, and I'll say several things. One, this is amendable on third reading, so we're not at the end of the road. Two, this is not tax increment financing, and I think that's a good thing. I think the city deciding to spend money or not on particular infrastructure projects in a one-off way like this is better than having something like this happen through TIF. Third, everything that is going to get paid for with the $15 million is already in the CIB as an approved item, and frankly was already approved in the capital spending plan that the council voted for in October. I understand that some of the work that's the subject of this has already been complete and may have been completed or at least started before the Amazon deal was announced. The thing that puts me in the place where, well, I'm 100% sure that there ought to be a clawback provision. The thing that has me wanting to see participation agreements like this, if we're going to spend infrastructure money, is the fact that there is $65 million worth of infrastructure that's in the CIB that's getting done and paid for by a private party. And I would say pretty happily that pretty much anywhere in the county that somebody wants to do $65 million worth of stuff that's in the CIB, I think we ought to think about kicking in $15 million to add on to that. And so again, for the amendment, it's to add a clawback provision, which hopefully should be relatively non-controversial. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Mendez. Does that provide further clarity for you, Councilman Glover?
So what I will do is I will go one step further. In the event it falls apart, and we've seen these things, for those of us who have been around here for a while, we've seen things fall apart, and we didn't have, quote, the clawback piece of it. I don't understand, and the reason I keep beating up the $15.2 million and the other piece of it, I mean, I've got people in my district who have paid for improvements or for site studies on Central Pike that we still aren't there. But here's the bottom line. In the event they fall short, we have a clawback, but what does it actually mean? And if we go forward and we're 4 years or 5 years down the road, how does this actually help us? And I'm sorry, Chair, but you know, we just spend money like it's crazy here in this chamber. And I realize a lot of people think that I just always beat this particular issue up. But I'm pretty certain people around town are a little bit fed up with this, and they're nervous about what's coming as far as what's going to happen with their taxes going forward. And so I appreciate the fact the amendment's there, but I just think we do these things and we don't understand the full ramification of what it is we're doing sometimes. We buy into a shallow understanding, and then the taxpayers are the one who pick up the tab. There's no doubt in my mind we'll probably end up voting for this again tonight. We'll go ahead and spend the money. But I just think that until we understand the full deal, why do we have to do it right now? Why can't we have it as one package? And that's my question.
Thank you so much, Councilman Glover. There's no more discussion on the amendment. Council Lady Weiner, are you on the amendment? You're going to be on the actual bill. Okay, seeing no more discussion as it relates to the amendment. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, now we're on the bill as amended. Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. And thank everybody for being here. Just to clarify a little bit, Mr. Jameson, this is amendable on third reading?
Yes.
And with that, then, Chair, I would make a request that I think we should, since it is amendable on third reading, to re-refer it back to your committee here on third reading, since there may be future amendments on this. And then and then also, again, if you didn't mind, Chair, I've had a request. I know Mr. Jameson's office has been working on it, but I think it would be important for the council to have a collection or a compendium of the participation agreements that are currently in force. This has clearly become a material part of our budgeting now, with a material amount of the public works budget in the last CSP is in now what we would call participation agreements to know how much of spending. And participation agreements, I think, should join TIF and abatements and asset sales and incentive payments as one of the mechanisms of government that we are using with development. So to that end, I had a couple of questions. I see Nashville Yards is very fine attorney here, and to that, I'd love to just ask a couple of questions, and maybe Mr. Wilshire would have some to have a record. If we didn't approve this, what would happen?
Councilman Cooper, are you addressing that to Nashville Yards attorney?
Well, if he didn't mind, and
Or
Mr.
attorney.
Wilshire. So if this were not approved, what would happen?
We'll have Attorney Baum.
Sure, thank you. I mean, obviously parts, I think, of the infrastructure as well as parts of the total infrastructure package that Councilman Mendez referenced that's a part of Exhibit A, that would have to be scaled back and changed and altered around the park, boardwalk, and some of the capacity as it results to the infrastructure. Obviously, that's a place that we hoped we would never get to, and obviously if we got to that, we'd have to come back with some real specifics as to how we would make up that difference.
So you would redesign the infrastructure that is there, that is currently being proposed?
I don't want to use the word design since I'm not an architect, but how about reconfigure?
Reconfigure it. Okay, and then the next question is, as Councilman Glover was pointing out, $15 million is sort of payment for the development, and then possibly a $15 million for a proposed tenant of the development. Which would the developer rather have? The payment to themselves or the payment to their tenant?
I'm not sure that I can answer that question. I think one thing to keep in perspective is this is, along with the park, is about a 16.5-acre site. Where the tenant is going is a fraction of that, a pretty small piece of that. The infrastructure is for the entire site that obviously moves from Broadway to Church. The tenant piece of that would be on the other side of Church, kind of facing NES and the YMCA. So from that standpoint, I'm not sure. Obviously, there's some state incentives involved with it, but this was kind of an independent conversation and discussion with Metro now going back over a year.
But for this investment, that applies to the whole project. This $15 million and the other 15 would simply be for the tenant.
That's correct. The tenant for the 1 or 2 office buildings at what we consider parcels 4 and 5.
Thank you. Is Nashville Yards using the green space that it is purchasing to get bonus density under DTZ zoning?
My understanding is no. That's correct. No, sir.
So in no way is the green space being used for additional density. And then, again, I know you've worked closely with the city for a long period of time. What is the expected cost to the city of future traffic and transportation needs created by this development? I'm assuming there was a traffic study that possibly showed improvements that might make fitting in these 15,000 people a little easier?
Yes, sir. So there was a traffic study done in December of 17 that I think actually came before that was a part of the discussion with the Public Works Committee back last March when we talked about the upper 10th concept coming off of Church Street. As a result of the update with parcels 4 and 5, that traffic study has been updated. The traffic counts actually come down. The intersections remain roughly the same. But what is in the plan and what is in the infrastructure, my understanding is all of those, or should be the vast majority of those recommendations, are included as a part of what's in the infrastructure plan.
So really, you're not anticipating any additional negative traffic effect from this project that would have to be dealt with off-site?
From the change as it results to the Amazon announcement at parcels 4 and 5. What you originally had as a part of the master plan on parcel 4 was actually a larger office building that's going to be built. Parcel 5 was intended to be 330 residential units, and now that will become an office building. The retail and the restaurant space also goes way down. The building is being designed to take into account several things that we've been asked to do by the tenant as it relates to bikes and storage and just what they anticipate from their workforce. So the updated traffic study should actually be improved upon the original traffic study that was considered and approved.
Okay, so translating that, you all are not paying for any off-site traffic improvements currently envisioned?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. You mentioned housing units. Is there any affordable housing on this sub-project?
At this point, no. There is still a piece of this that can be developed for residential, but has not. That project has not begun.
But you're announcing some residential units.
There are anticipated at parcel 2 to be some residential.
Well, why not have any affordable housing, particularly given the city, remitting $15 million towards the infrastructure cost?
Yes, sir.
Or having an incentive payment?
Sure. Obviously, they're still working through the development piece of that and the economics of that. At the same time, what they thought the message had been, particularly through the Nashville Next program, was what the real focus had been was around park and open space and connectivity. And so a lot of that investment was made around those as opposed to affordable housing, although the residential piece of this has not yet been finalized.
So the developer is open to having some affordable housing in this project?
I can't speak from that standpoint of it other than to say that piece of it has not yet been finalized, does not currently include any affordable housing.
But, well, if you didn't mind asking them that question, thank you. I know you're close to them because, again, this is only on second reading and it'll be back on third reading. And then finally, what are the infrastructure improvements the developer, if you could kind of have a thought about this, would not have on their own, but for this $15 million, what are the infrastructure improvements that we would not be getting that they would eliminate? I know you were uncomfortable in going to the design, but in effect, what additional infrastructure are we buying with this $15 million that would not be something that they'd be doing on their own? It's obviously a large and fabulous project.
Yes, sir.
And which will have lots of great infrastructure needed, but for their own benefit, for their clients and tenants.
Yeah, without question, there is a benefit to the Nashville Yards and to the amenities offered by Nashville Yards. And our understanding is what is being reimbursed is work that Metro said ultimately we would do anyway, is work that they've asked us to do above and beyond as a part of this, and work that brings kind of additional capacity, not just to our site, but other sites, both from water and sewer, from utilities, and from infrastructure. To be completely honest with you, that's not an exercise we've done to say that if the $15 million didn't come, exactly what would get cut from this or where it would get cut from that. And frankly, that's an exercise we hope we don't have to do. We have tried to proceed in good faith, and we've tried to get in a position where this development can take advantage of some of those opportunities, and so that the developer could establish credibility with the mayor and with the council that they were going to deliver on what they had proposed to provide.
I'm sorry, whose credibility?
The developer's credibility.
The developer. I'm sure the developer has a lot of credibility. I was worried it was ours.
No. They're establishing credibility with you, Councilman.
No, that's always dangerous. Thank you very much, and I know there are a lot of people ready with other questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Great questions, Councilman Cooper. Attorney Bone, you indicated that Metro advised you that this would be work we would have done anyway. Was a timeline provided? If we're going to do the work, when would that work have been completed?
No, ma'am. We had not discussed what that timeline was, and that was just a piece. I mean, that was one part of the overall piece. We said it would be stuff that Metro would eventually done at some point.
Some point could be 10 years, 15 years out?
I wouldn't be the right one to answer that question.
Okay. Councilwoman Weiner.
Are you reading the notes on my page? So to your question just now, that's my question number 2 here. And so I'll go out of order and ask that someone from Public Works come up and answer that question.
We have, looks like Director Sturdivant. Merry New Year. You're on.
Good evening, everyone. So we didn't have plans to, most of the infrastructure, certainly close to all of it, is substandard. It's an old part of town. And, but we didn't have any immediate plans to replace it, although it was on our radar, certainly with all the needs in the community and downtown. It just hadn't risen to that level yet. What we looked at, though, and I think the water department viewed it the same way, was when projects like this come up, there's a opportunity, the timing presents an opportunity, and it's the time to do it. So particularly the intersection at Broadway and 10th, we had always wanted to fix that offset. We never really put a timetable to it, but when this project comes up, then this is the time to do it. So it's really an opportunity type thing, but to answer specifically, we didn't have a time frame on it.
Okay, so could I ask the same question of Water Services and have Mr. Potter come
We
address
had Director Potter and supporting cast.
Yeah, and the specific needs as it relates to not only this project, but the status of our water system, because we've had several water mains break here recently.
Yes, ma'am. When it gets cold, especially when the temperature fluctuates wildly, whenever it gets cold and then warm again and warm and cold again, the cast iron pipe in the system will have a tendency to snap like a candy cane. So we will see lots of more main break activity when you have variance in temperature. Speaking directly to this project, Mark was exactly right in that an opportunity presented itself and we took advantage of it. If we had an unlimited budget at Metro Water, the way we would do urban renewal would be exactly this way. We would do it block by block or area by area, and we would go in and replace the water infrastructure to the new standard present as compared to 1920, 1930 when this was developed originally. We would install new sewer and we would install improved stormwater. In this specific case, we've got a combined system involved, which is the rainwater and sewage that was built in about 1885. We have an opportunity to remove flow from that combined system and also redirect the storm flow so we can handle it better. So whenever we see a project of this nature, we get everybody together and we identify everything we want, and then we identify what's fair for us to pay and what's fair for the developer to pay. But fundamentally, we don't want to go back in later and do something we should have done before, because that would be silly and it would demonstrate really poor engineering judgment.
Would it also be more expensive?
Absolutely.
Twofold, threefold, tenfold?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, thank you. So that was one of my questions. And essentially for the viewing public, can you, Mr. Wilshire, please run down for us the return on investment that we're getting, not so much in terms of the 15,000 potential jobs. I want to know hard money that we can see maybe on an annualized basis that will go back into our operating budget so that some of the projects that we need to have done in our council districts that may not have gotten as much done, we'll have more money to be able to spend more.
Mr.
And
Wilshire.
for that, it coming from property tax revenue.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you, Madam Chair. As you well know, the property tax rate in Metro on commercial property, and all of this would be commercial unless the residential piece is condos, but I believe it would be rental. The property tax rate is essentially 1.262% of appraised value. So in terms of the operating return specifically from property taxes, and sales taxes would be incremental to that. And I think in a previous meeting about something, we've had conversations about whether that's incremental sales taxes or it's cannibalizing sales tax dollars that otherwise would have been collected in the city. So we can leave that conversation aside for the moment. Focusing simply on the property taxes developed, if there were $100 million of property developed on this site, obviously we generate $1.262 million. We believe that it will be well in excess of 10 times that. And so if there were $1 billion of development that were to occur on the site, and we actually think it will be well in excess of that, but just to make the math easy, there would be about $12.62 million annually collected in property tax dollars on the development when fully built out, when that came online and was built out. Overall, the company has performed an economic analysis of the development of the site. And so now we're going from sort of my numbers to numbers that they have created and the development entity. And I believe the number, and Mr. Bone can correct me if I'm wrong, or other representatives, about $430 million of property taxes over the next 30 years, I believe. And so I think in terms of a return for the city, I'm sure, and I've had conversations with other council members, there's a question of, well, gosh, if that money's coming anyway, then why should there be any participation agreement at all? Because we're just going to, we're going to get that $430 million over the next several decades regardless. And I think, as Attorney Bone has already laid out, while this is not binary, is there going to be a development on this site or not? There will be development. It's really more about the scale. So I'm taking it from the largest part of the funnel to the smallest and saying, ultimately, there is more and better development in the site because of this investment in infrastructure by the city, and there are lower future costs for the city from going back and digging up streets to put in water infrastructure that we could put in today. And so for both of those reasons, I would not sit here and say, if you invest $15.25 million, you get an incremental $430 million of property taxes. That's not, I don't think that's true. But I do believe you are going to get more property tax dollars because you're going to get a bigger, better, more successful development that the city will benefit from, both in terms of the property taxes generated on site and from the overall development activity in the city. And so as a return on investment from a city standpoint, we think it is both the smart thing to do from an engineering standpoint and the prudent thing to do from a financial standpoint.
So essentially, my understanding from all the conversation today is we're getting $55 million in infrastructure improvements for roughly $15.2 million, plus saving on expenses moving forward, plus getting additional property tax revenue, because when it was Lifeway, we were getting nothing on the property, right?
I really should have just had you say all that, because that's a much more succinct way of putting what I said. Yes.
Thank you. That's all I had, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Weiner. Council Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. My questions are related to process somewhat as it relates to our CSP and what was in the initial Exhibit A of their participation agreement and why we are now engaging here as a bill that is a separate Exhibit B. And I guess I'm just wondering, from a process standpoint, Mr. Wilshire, is subsequent to the October capital spending plan, has this only just now come to light, the need for this extra funding? And if so, why?
Yeah, so I will, if you'll allow me, I'll take a bit of a step back from the overall process on this and maybe touch on a few different pieces of the CIB, CSP, and the participation agreement. And then if I don't answer your question, I have no doubt you will ask follow-up questions. So before the city can do any work, projects have to be listed in the capital improvements budget. The items being discussed today and the items that we're talking about have been included in the capital improvements budget. There may be a couple of additional items that need to come in the future. I'm not 100% positive about that, but I think everything's in the CIB that will be done. What I know is in the CIB are the specific items that will be funded initially and have been funded by the capital spending plan already. So this body approved a capital spending plan in October, and included in that was $3 million to essentially fix the intersection of Broadway and 10th, which is a mess, as anyone who's come out of the Frist or come out of not Grand Central, the Hermitage, any of the Union Station Hotel knows that intersection does not function well. There was monies included in that. In addition, there's $3.25 million funded by water for water's component of this. So of the 15.25 million that's being discussed for the for the participation agreement, effectively 6.25 million of it has already been paid for. There is 9 million that has not been paid for by this body yet. And so it is the anticipation of Metro government, of the administration at least, that in future capital spending plans, there will be additional installments made on this, not to exceed, as it states in the participation agreement, more than $6 million in any one year. But effectively, we are anticipating $3, $4, $5 million over the next couple or three capital spending plans as this work is being done. So instead of just writing a big check right up front, we're going to sort of dole it out in a more cost-effective manner. And so there is essentially, there would be some sort of commitment expressed by this body that is the intention to do this additional infrastructure work. And as Councilman Mendez's amendment has now included in this proposed bill, there would be effectively requirements that all of the infrastructure work that is laid out in Exhibit A, whether Metro is paying for it or not. I mean, it's essentially work that the developer's doing. We've got nothing to do with it, but if they don't do every penny of that, then we get our money back. So that's sort of the sequence of participation agreement, capital improvements budget, capital spending plan.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think if you'll recall, I was one of the lone voices trying to defer our last capital spending plan, or at least one meeting, trying to seek this kind of clarity because I felt like we had too many kind of large downtown big projects with buckets of money within which we had not really kind of parsed out particular pieces. I do understand and appreciate that we spoke about the intersection at 10th Avenue North. And so just to clarify, is it that intersection specifically that has the CIB number of 19 PW 0003? That intersection improvement?
I should defer to Director Sturdivant or someone else. That may be a general paving line item. That may be I'm not sure what exactly that CIB number is.
That's a general paving number.
No, I'm saying I don't know. I don't.
Okay, well, it's just interesting to me that it has the number 0003. I also am somewhat befuddled by the fact that we have a bucket called roads in October's CSP that we designated 15 million for, and somehow that has become a part of what's getting done here. Yep. So it just seems to me that we have put together some buckets in an effort to do the work that needs to be done here. And so I certainly appreciate that it makes good sense from an engineering perspective, especially as it relates to the water improvements, that we do those in partnership with this developer at this time as this project is underway. But I do feel at this juncture we still lack clarity on sidewalks, intersections, road improvements, boardwalks. I mean, these are things that we discussed preliminarily in Public Works Committee last year, and we did, to Mr. Bone's point, emphasize that connectivity beyond the boundaries of this project was kind of important. We wanted to make sure that we were not just improving the infrastructure and it was sort of, insular or contained. So I do appreciate that we are thinking about this more broadly as it relates to, downtown and areas beyond the project that provide that access. But with all due respect, I still am a little befuddled by how this has kind of gotten translated from participation agreement into CIB with various numbers and buckets referred to as, quote, roads. We're calling out particular intersection improvements, but then we also have another number. So I just, you know, I personally, Chair, you know, I would like us to, as a body, and
Do you have a motion, Councilwoman Henderson?
yes, a budget committee to understand this in more detail, because, you know, that was back to one of the reasons I wanted to defer the CSP. And so I would move to defer this 2 meetings
With a re-referral?
Re-referral. And I don't know whether it's to this committee or to Public Works, but some sort of presentation and a little more detail on specifically what are these CIB numbers, what is the work to be done, how do we anticipate it being stretched out over the various years, what are the particular amounts, what are the CIB numbers, et cetera, because, you know, again, in the same way that we needed that detail for the CSP, and I think it's incumbent upon us to understand what is in all these buckets of incentives and partnerships that we give to large development when we continue to try to, you know, scrape to get $1 more million for traffic calming and $1 more million for bikeways. And, you know, I recognize that downtown is a neighborhood as well, but I think it's really incumbent upon us to understand all this in detail. So with that, I would renew my motion to defer 2 meetings, and then Chair, perhaps you could elaborate on.
With a re-referral. So it's been, the motion has been made for a 2-meeting deferral with a re-referral back to Budget and Finance. Councilwoman Henderson, we're the first committee to take up this bill. It hasn't gone to the Planning, Zoning, and Historical or to Public Works. That'll happen tomorrow. So we have a motion for deferral on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we're going to need show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? Seven to 5. Bill is deferred for 2 meetings with a re-referral back to Budget and Finance as amended. There's some council members in the queue. We've already, Councilman Hall.
Well, thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's even necessary now, but I just wanted to recap.
It isn't. We've already voted.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
And we are adjourned.
Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.